Historians refer to the transfer of animals, plants, diseases, and people that resulted from contacts between Europeans and Amerindians, or Native Americans in both North and South America, as the Columbian Exchange after the explorer Columbus, who started this process in 1492. Note that this was a two-way exchange to and from the Americas. So what was actually exchanged and what were some of the effects? Well, here's a good chart for you. Animals and plants, well, you had from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas, Europeans brought horses, pigs, cows, chickens, sugarcane, bananas, wheat, rice, and those are just a few that we could name. The effects on the environment were enormous. You had deforestation and erosion and soil depletion. The introduction to horses to the Americas changed the cultures of almost every Native American group. Cash crops that were grown on plantations in the Americas increased the demand for coerced labor or slaves, and then they were exported to Europe and to the Middle East. So the whole global economy was really depending on slaves and coerced labor, which was only increased the demand for them, which made this system really, really hard to stop. Now, from the Americas to Afro-Eurasia, the Europeans returned with few animals that had a global impact, but among the plants, they brought back potatoes, tomatoes, tobacco, American corn or maize, cocoa, and chili peppers, as well as other peppers. The potato became incredibly popular in Europe. It stored well on ships, and it grew in a wide variety of soils and climate, particularly in Ireland. The potato blight that hit Ireland in the 1800s killed almost 1 million people because they had been relying on the potato as a sole source of nutrients for so long. And these maize became a staple in both Africa and China, and these American foods created unprecedented population growth wherever they were planted, in Afro-Eurasia as well. Diseases resulting from the Columbian Exchange. The greatest effect on the people of the Americas was the introduction of diseases that had not existed before the arrival of the Europeans. Smallpox, in particular, eradicated whole villages of native people, creating a demographic catastrophe that has not been equaled in all of history. It's estimated that approximately 90% of the population of the Americas died from these newly introduced diseases. The Europeans had developed a sort of immunity because of herd animals. But a good example of a Native American group that was just completely decimated by smallpox would be the Seminoles, which actually, Florida State Seminoles. They were over 95% of the Seminoles were killed in a smallpox epidemic. And this depopulation, created huge open spaces for Europeans to conquer and settle with little resistance. And also some things that were brought in from Europe to the Americas were measles and influenza. People migrated to the Americas during the Columbian Exchange. Most people migrated voluntarily, but many Africans were forcibly taken to the Americas to serve as slaves. Some Europeans, particularly from the Spanish-held Canary Islands, were also resettled to the Americas against their will, either as colonists and or indentured servants. Spanish explorers were not settlers, and few women made the early voyages. Mixed race children were born out of these relationships between Spaniards and native women, and slowly European women made the dangerous trip to the Americas, and European-only families began to form. And this had an effect in that a new social hierarchy was created, with skin color being the determining factor in status. Europeans created large, highly profitable sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean, but because of the virtual elimination of natives, there was a great shortage of labor. Portugal was the first among European nations to enslave Africans along Africa's Atlantic coast and haul them to their sugarcane plantations in Brazil. And then Spain followed, buying Africans from merchants along the slave coast and transporting them in packed ships across the Atlantic. And this was called the Middle Passage. And they took them to the Caribbean to work producing sugar. And we're going to talk more about the Middle Passage and the actual slave trade in later videos. Religions of the Columbian Exchange. Christian missionaries accompanied explorers and settlers to the Americas. In their zeal to spread the holy word, Catholic clergy in both the Portuguese and Spanish territories held mass baptisms with little religious instruction, and this meant that the traditions of the original faiths of the natives continued with Christian beliefs woven in. Now, precious metals. Again, when we get more to a more economic discussion, we're going to talk more about the gold and silver trade, but you do need to know that it was part of the Columbian Exchange. Gold from central Mexico went straight into the Spanish monarch's treasury, but it was silver from Peru that became the global metal of exchange. Silver from the Americas was traded for Asian spices, silk, and all other commodities that the Europeans had come to desire. Japan was also brought into this network because it too had silver mines. China and India were, of course, on the receiving end of most of the silver, but for the first time, a global network of exchange was established.